Tideland was in some ways the flip side of the Brothers Grimm, having made them both almost together. And it's dark the way Grimm's fairy tales ought to be. It's a thing we seem to be so frightened of these days. Children aren't supposed to be frightened. Of course they're supposed to be frightened. I mean, that's what the fairy tales always did to me. They scared me. They made me concerned about the things that life might have in front of me. And so I thought, in a sense, prepared me for them. I mean, Tideland is also very much about Alice in Wonderland. Again, my other favorite book after the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales. It's because suddenly the world is seen through the looking glass, the other side, twisted around, upside down. And in structure, it's like Alice because Jeliza-Rose, moves from one thing to the next, and it's not that simple, tight kind of narrative one has gotten so bored with in cinema these days. Imagination and madness have always been things I've played with, and so why not inflict it upon a child? Because there are moments in the film you do think she's going crackers. I mean, she's really twisting. Then she pulls back. I think there's a moment when the dolls stop speaking with her lips moving. And I'm sorry. There's a moment when the dolls speak without Jeliza-Rose's lips moving, and then you know you've made another step down another layer of either hell or the rabbit hole. And in that scene, she's actually quite mad, I think. But then she recovers because she finds a new friend. And that's what's interesting about her resilience. We throw her into really dark and deep and dangerous and disturbing situations, and she always seems to bounce back. And there's a moment when she's discovered Dell and thinks she's going to be her new friend, and then she's not her new friend, and it's getting worrisome. But luckily Dickens turns up, and there is a real, true new friend. And so it gets through to the next part of the film. She's constantly rescued by people at the right time. I have quite vivid dreams, which I manage to forget the minute I wake up almost. But the dream that used to stick with me is my ability to fly. But it was never like in Brazil flying through the clouds. It was only about 3 or 4 feet above the ground. I zipped along about that height, but I wasn't touching the ground. And literally years ago, after having dreamt this for so many years, I actually had a sense memory of the whole thing. My whole body felt that I had flown. And I was in my 20s at this point, and I actually had to get down on the ground with a friend standing there to show him how I could fly, how I just levitated, and then off I went, and I couldn't do it. But it was so bizarre that your sense memories, your sense of touch and feeling and sound and everything are part of dreams. And that's always what intrigues me, what the body gets up to, not just the mind when you're asleep. Jeff always wanted to be a rock star. He's even done his own albums, and he occasionally tours. And even on the Big Lebowski tours, sometimes he gets up and sings and plays. So here was a chance on screen to be a rock star. And he was wonderful. It was a happy moment. But the main thing when I cast him, I said he got to play the Janet Leigh part from Psycho. And the idea of being a big star who basically sits out most of the movie, and he does sit out the movie. And the great thing is we actually prepared so he wouldn't have to do the sitting, but in the end, it's actually Jeff doing the sitting. While Jodelle Ferland climbs all over him, while his tongue is swelling, while the flies are crawling all over him, that's Jeff. We really created 2 worlds. There's the world of nature outside in these great open fields of wheat and grain where freedom exists for the child and everything is wonderful. Birds sing, bees buzz, and it's fantastic. And then there's the house, and inside the house, and it's claustrophobic, and it's dark, and it's rotting, it's decaying. So you've got these 2 very different worlds. And I think that's what's interesting for the audience, because they say, how amazing. It's really the juxtaposition and the contrast that makes it so surprising. We also have the advantage of little doll heads that sit on Jodelle's fingers. And those are real characters, and they're easy to do. It's like a puppet show. And we didn't have to have horses, we didn't have to have flying machines. It was a joy. I wish I could find more books that imaginative, because my imagination is run out. It only is able to imagine megalomaniac things, you know, recreating the world. I can't seem to recreate just a little teeny bit of the world. The art department assembled lots and lots of dolls' heads. And we sent one evening, it was like a casting session. Okay, there's this one, I like that face, I don't like the hair, you know. And little by little, even though the characters were written, they hadn't been developed as much as we developed them when we actually worked out who the heads represented with her. And there's one, Mystique, who's the blonde, who has an English accent. It's kind of who Jeliza-Rose would like to be, so sophisticated, so grand, so intelligent. And then there's, who, I'm trying to remember the other names now. There's the one who's actually like her. There's, come on, this is disastrous. The man made the film, he can't remember it. It's all gone away. There's, there's a little brown-haired one who speaks in a sweet little voice, who's very nervous all the time and really frightened. And that's Jeliza-Rose deep down inside. She is frightened, but she would never admit it. And then there's a glitter gal who's scarred and twisted and deformed. And that's who really maybe she feels she identifies with most. That she's just, even though on the surface, Jeliza-Rose is all joy and happiness and bounce, inside she's quite a tragic little girl in there. And then there's Baby Blonde, who's just the ditzy Marilyn Monroe, stupid, blonde, and maybe that would be a nice way to live your life too. You don't have to think, you don't have to do anything, you just, and boys love you. Always in my films I identify with the main character, or main characters. And I had to become a little girl in a sense. And I don't know, it wasn't so much being a little girl, it was being just a kid again, is what it is. So boys and girls, you know, pre-puberty are reasonably non-sexual, so one could just play again. And that's what we did. I mean, you know, that's all actors or even directors, that's what we get paid for doing, is playing. This time it's just more obvious that we're playing like children. We usually disguise that by wearing beards and wigs to seem like we're adults, but it's all playing. And once you let go and you let a character actually inhabit you, then it's really easy to imagine the world. And that's why, I mean, for me as a director, I'm in many ways like an actor, but I don't have to act. But I can absorb what that character is and just imagine the world. And for, you know, bits of the days I can pretend to be a little girl. Then later in the day, I can pretend to be a retarded kid who's 20, and then I can pretend to be Jeff, being cool and zingy. So that's what I get to do, and I get to choose the images that present that to the world. I didn't even think about the fact that it could have been a boy because the book was a girl, and I think the relationship is all a feminine thing. So it's kind of like finding the feminine side of me and going with it but the truth of the matter, and I've said this before, is that I didn't really direct Jodelle. I sort of watched with amazement at what she did. We had the scenes, we had the script, we had the setup, and I'd put her into it, and she would choose to do things that always surprised me. So in a sense, I was probably pretending to be a little girl played by a 64-year-old man, sort of a romantic, sentimentalized version. She was playing a little girl like a little girl. And that's what the strength of the movie is. It's really surprising, the choices she makes. And it reminds me of what my children were like when they were little. I look back at them and say, oh, they were wonderful. They weren't. They were really tough little creatures. I think adults are frightened to admit what children are. I really do. I think it's always surprising what children are. And adults have become so inundated with, you know, what the media says about children. And what it says about children is that they're victims. That's what they seem to be in the world. They're there for, there's child abuse, there's rape, there's abduction, there's pedophilia, there's everything out there waiting for a child. And it's actually bullshit, because yes, there's always bad things in the world, but it's such a minor, teensy little bit. But there's a kind of hysteria that's been going on for the last several years, and it does make me crazy. It's one reason I wanted to make the film, because I said, come on, this is nonsense. This is a sentimentalized version of children. Children are innocent victims. They're strong, and I keep repeating that I think they're resilient, and here was a chance to show in a film a child put into very difficult and by normal circumstances unpleasant, dangerous, despairing situations, and she survives. And then what happens with adults, because of all these fears and about, quote, pedophilia, they start talking about Dickens, who's a retarded kid, and her relationship with him. And there's not an ounce of pedophilia in it. It's only in the minds of adults now who have been so brainwashed into thinking the world is full of people like that. This is a very innocent movie, and it's very important when we were making it to maintain that innocence. That we never were voyeurs, we were never pushing the situation. Everybody involved, every actor, every crew member was saying, this is a very delicate world we're creating and we can't cross the line. And I don't think we did. When we were making it, even when we were raising the money, I felt we needed women in positions of power, women with money, because the men reading the script reacted as men, serious men react. Men who are macho and butch and are paternal and all those people. And they were very nervous by the subject matter. Women understood it very quickly, and luckily we had a Canadian woman producer and a fund in Canada that was controlled by a woman. And that's why the film was made. Women aren't frightened the way men are frightened by this film. Women have probably been through similar experiences, not probably as extreme as this one, but they've been through possibly disturbing situations, and they've come out fine. Women are also aware of their own sexuality as a child, and men don't want to know about this. And I think there's another thing that happens in this film. Men, when they see images, they respond to them. And Jodelle, who's a 9.5-year-old girl, one scene looks like a little 9.5-year-old girl clumping around the place. Other scene, she's trying on a wig, putting on lipstick, and talking like her mother. And suddenly, she looks like a 19-year-old girl. And men, I think, feel uncomfortable the fact that they find her attractive, knowing she's only a 9.5-year-old girl. And they're probably thinking to themselves, am I a pedo? Which is nonsense. It's about imagery, and imagery is what we're surrounded with all the time. You pick up any magazine, what are they? They're selling sex everywhere. And this was one of our problems casting the film. In the original book, the girl is 12 years old. She's on the edge of puberty. The reality was, when we started casting 12, 11-year-old girls from Canada, they were already no longer innocent. They were too much like what the media was trying to turn them into. They were, wearing their miniskirts, are all dressed up just like a big girl. And it was really hard to find a child who felt innocent and was still at the same time good enough to do the part. And Jodelle was luckily the one we found. The ending of the film is, everybody has a different attitude towards that ending, whether it's a happy ending, whether it's an unhappy ending, whether, I don't know. I like the fact that everybody can have their own version of it. I think Jeliza-Rose is going to survive. I'm not really worried about her. I think she might look back on the few days that she spent in the house and in the fields with these people as the most extraordinary years of her life, days of her life. And maybe the rest of her life will be a nice, normal life, but maybe not. I don't know. I remember when we were starting the film, I was looking at pictures that Lewis Carroll took of Alice Liddell, who was Alice. And when he was writing the stories for her, she was a wonderful little minx. She was really sparky, and you could just see this poor guy was obsessed with trying to please her, trying to fill her head with wonder. And then you see her as a middle-aged woman, and it's just gone. Now, I don't know if that was a result of having to live your life knowing you were Alice, of Alice in Wonderland, and life never lived up to those stories and those days, when he's reading stories out to her. The funniest thing about the film has been the making of it was the easiest, pleasurable experience, and the raising the money and the selling the film have proved to be difficult. So there's no easy way of making a film all the way through. At some point, it's always going to be difficult. But no, I think it's a gem. And I think one of the happiest moments was when we were at the Toronto Film Festival last year in this huge cinema, and 1,000 people stood up at the end applauding the end of the film, and Jeff Bridges leaned over to me and said, "Terry, it's a masterpiece." And I said, "Great, thanks."